Mother accuses son's black friend of stealing her pearl necklace, and the end is shocking. In a peaceful suburban neighborhood, a young black man, Malik, finds his life upended when accused of stealing a pearl necklace during a visit to his best friend Ethan's house. What begins as a simple misunderstanding quickly unravels into a tense exploration of friendship, prejudice, and the power of truth. As secrets surface and relationships are tested, can Malik clear his name and confront the biases that threaten to tear his world apart? In the tranquility of an American suburb, a pearl necklace disappears, and the life of a young black man, Malik, turns into a nightmare. Accused of theft by his best friend's mother, racial tension and moral dilemmas come to the fore, revealing how ignorance can distort the truth. As secrets are unearthed, the quest for justice becomes a fight not only for Malik's innocence, but also for the redemption of all those involved. The sun poured down over the quiet suburb, casting a warm glow on the asphalt court where Malik and Ethan were deep into a game of basketball. Their laughter echoed, blending with the rhythmic thud of the ball hitting the ground. Malik, with his lean frame and quick feet, darted around Ethan, who was a little taller but slower. "Come on, man. You can do better than that," Malik teased, grinning as he stole the ball and made a swift layup. "Hey, that was a foul," Ethan protested, running after Malik, but the joy in his voice was unmistakable. "Foul? In your dreams," Malik shot back, laughing. "You need to learn how to defend." As they played, the world around them faded into the background. The worries of school, family, and the complexities of their lives were temporarily forgotten. On this court, they were just two friends, united by their love for the game and the ease of their companionship. But the serenity was abruptly shattered when Clara, Ethan's mother, burst onto the scene. Her face was pale, and her eyes wide with panic. "Ethan!" "Malik," she called out, her voice sharp enough to slice through the laughter. Malik paused, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "What's wrong, Mrs. Carter?" he asked, concern etching across his features. Clara's breath came in quick gasps as she approached them, her hands fidgeting nervously at her sides. "My grandmother's pearl necklace is gone. It was on the table when I left the room, and now it's missing." Ethan's expression turned serious. "Are you sure it was there, Mom?" "I'm sure." Clara snapped, her gaze darting between the two boys, her mind racing. "I can't believe this is happening. It must have been taken while I was in the kitchen." Malik felt a chill run down his spine. "Mrs. Carter, I would never." "I know you wouldn't, Malik," Clara interrupted, her voice trembling, but her eyes were clouded with doubt. "But you were here. You were the last one in the house before I noticed it was missing." Ethan stepped closer to his mother, his brow furrowed. "What are you saying, Mom? You think Malik took it?" Clara hesitated, the weight of her words heavy in the air. I don't know, Ethan. But you can't deny that it's suspicious." Malik felt the air around him thicken. "I didn't take anything, Mrs. Carter," he insisted, the heat of indignation rising in his chest. "You know me. I've been your son's friend for years. Don't raise your voice at me, Malik." Clara snapped, her frustration boiling over. "I'm just trying to understand how this could have happened. I trusted you, and now I feel betrayed." "Betrayed?" Malik echoed, his heart sinking. "You think I would steal from you? I've been nothing but a good friend to Ethan." "Maybe you should think about who you're friends with," Clara said coldly, crossing her arms. Ethan stood between them, his expression a mixture of disbelief and fear. "Mom, stop. You're not helping. Malik is my friend. He wouldn't do this." "Ethan," Clara said, her voice softening slightly, "I know you want to defend him, but I have to protect our family too. We can't ignore the possibility." The tension hung in the air like a thick fog, and Malik felt himself retreating inward, the warmth of the sun suddenly feeling distant. He glanced at Ethan, searching for support, but his friend seemed torn, caught between loyalty to his mother and his friendship with Malik. "I'll help you look for it, Mrs. Carter," Malik offered weakly, his heart racing with the weight of accusation. "No," Clara replied firmly. "I don't want you in my house. I need some time to think." Malik's stomach twisted. "But just go, Malik," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll talk to her." Malik nodded slowly, feeling the sting of betrayal settle in his chest. He turned and walked away, his mind racing. How could this happen? He had always been respectful in Clara's home, always treated her with kindness. As he made his way down the street, the laughter of children playing nearby felt like a distant memory. The world he had known just moments before was unraveling, and he could feel the weight of the rumors and whispers starting to take shape around him. "Hey, Malik," called out a neighbor, Mr. Thompson, who was watering his lawn. "Everything okay?" Malik forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, just playing ball." Mr. Thompson squinted, studying Malik's face. "You look troubled. You can talk to me if you need to." "Thanks, Mr. Thompson," Malik replied, his voice barely a whisper. "It's just a misunderstanding." As he walked away, the shadow of doubt loomed larger than ever. The warmth of the sun felt more like a spotlight, illuminating his every flaw, every suspicion others might hold against him. He couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, judged, and unfairly accused. Later that evening, Malik sat on the steps of his porch, staring at the ground, lost in thought. His mother joined him, sensing the heaviness in his heart. "What's wrong, Malik?" she asked gently, placing her hand on his shoulder. "Just something happened with Ethan's mom," he replied, the words spilling out with a rush of emotion. "She thinks I stole her grandmother's pearl necklace." His mother's eyes widened. "What? That's awful. You didn't do it, did you?" "Of course not," Malik explained, frustration bubbling to the surface. "I would never steal anything, but now everyone will think I did." "It's not fair, Mom." His mother sighed, her heart aching for her son. "People can be quick to judge, Malik, but you know who you are. Don't let their ignorance define you." "I just wanted to play ball and hang out with Ethan," Malik murmured, staring into the distance. "Now everything feels ruined." The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the neighborhood. But for Malik, the warmth felt distant. The shadows of doubt and prejudice began to creep in, and he couldn't help but wonder how long it would take for the truth to prevail in a world where trust could fracture so easily. As sun rays filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the worn pavement where Malik and Ethan had spent countless afternoons shooting hoops, the laughter that had once filled the air now felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the weight of accusation. Malik sat on the steps of his porch, his heart heavy with the burden of mistrust. He could still hear Clara's voice echoing in his mind, filled with anger and fear, as she pointed her finger at him, an accusation hanging in the air like a storm cloud. Ethan paced nervously in front of Malik, his brow furrowed with conflict. "I don't know what to do, Malik. My mom, she just went off. You know how she is," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Malik looked up, his expression a mixture of hurt and confusion. "Ethan, I didn't take anything. You know me. I would never do that." "I know, man. But she's convinced. She's been on edge ever since Grandma lost that necklace. It means everything to her," Ethan replied, running a hand through his tousled hair. I hate this." "Do you believe her?" Malik shot back, an edge creeping into his voice. Ethan looked away, the silence between them stretching like an unbridgeable chasm. "I don't know. It's not that simple. My mom she's scared. She's always been scared. It's like she sees danger everywhere." Malik's chest tightened at the words. "And what about me? Am I dangerous because of the color of my skin? Because that's what it feels like right now." Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Instead, he turned his back, staring out into the street where the sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The beauty of the moment felt starkly out of place in the turmoil brewing within him. As night fell, Malik found himself alone in his room, the walls echoing with the memories of happier days. He grabbed a basketball and went outside, hoping that the rhythmic bounce would clear his mind. The neighborhood was quiet, save for the distant sounds of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves. Malik shot the ball toward the hoop, missing the mark. Frustrated, he threw it again, this time with more force. The ball swished through the net, but the satisfaction was fleeting. "Why do I even care?" he muttered to himself. "I'm just the kid from down the block. No one sees me for who I am." The sound of footsteps approached, and Malik turned to see Mrs. Jenkins, their elderly neighbor, walking her dog. She stopped, leaning on her cane, her eyes studying him with a mix of curiosity and concern. "Evening, Malik," she said, her voice warm yet cautious. "I heard about what happened with the necklace." "Yeah, it's all over the neighborhood," Malik replied, bitterness creeping into his tone. "I'm the thief now." Mrs. Jenkins shook her head, her white curls bouncing slightly. "You know, dear, people can be quick to judge. It's easier for them to believe what they want to believe rather than face the truth." Malik scoffed. "Truth? The truth is I'm guilty until proven innocent. And even then, who will believe me? Sometimes, the truth takes time to reveal itself," she said gently. "You just have to hold on to your integrity. People will see you for who you are, even if it doesn't feel that way right now." "I don't know how much longer I can take this," he admitted, his voice cracking. "It's like I'm fighting a battle no one else can see." Mrs. Jenkins nodded, her gaze softening. "You're stronger than you think, Malik. Just remember, the world is full of shadows, but it's also full of light. You have a choice in how you respond to this." As she walked away, Malik felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. Maybe his story wasn't over yet. Maybe there was a way to turn this around. The next day, the community meeting was buzzing with tension. The local community center was filled to the brim with residents, all murmuring amongst themselves about the recent events. Malik stood at the back, feeling small and invisible among the crowd. He could see Ethan sitting with Clara, her face pale and drawn, anxiety etched into her features. Malik's heart ached at the sight. This was the woman who had once treated him like another son, and now he was an outcast in her eyes. The meeting began, and the community leader called for order. "Thank you all for coming. We're here to discuss the situation involving the necklace and the accusations against Malik," he said, looking at Malik with a mixture of pity and uncertainty. Malik felt a lump form in his throat as he stepped forward, the eyes of the crowd shifting toward him. "I didn't take the necklace," he said, his voice steady despite the tremor of fear inside. "I've lived in this neighborhood my whole life. I've played with your children, laughed with you at barbecues. I'm not a criminal." Clara shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her hands clenched in her lap. "But you were there, Malik. You were the last person seen with Ethan. Because I'm his friend," Malik exclaimed, frustration boiling over. "I've never stolen anything in my life. I work hard for everything I have. Why can't you see that?" The murmurs in the room grew louder as people began to weigh in, some supporting Malik, while others echoed Clara's fears. "You can't be too careful," one woman shouted, her voice laced with indignation. "We have to protect our community." "Protect it from what?" Malik shot back. "From me? You think just because I'm black, I'm a threat? That's the problem right there." Ethan stood up, shaking visibly. "Mom, please. You have to listen to him. Malik is my best friend. He wouldn't do this." Clara's eyes widened in shock. "Ethan, you don't know what you're saying. You can't trust him. He's not like us." Malik's heart sank deeper at her words, feeling the sting of betrayal cut through him. "Not like us," he echoed, his voice cracking. "What does that even mean? That I'm not worthy of your trust because of my skin color?" The room fell silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone. Malik took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "I'm not asking for your pity. I'm asking you to see me, to see the person I am, not the color of my skin. I'm just as human as anyone else in this room." Tears welled in Ethan's eyes as he turned to his mother. "You need to understand this, Mom. We can't keep living in fear. We have to trust each other. We have to change." Clara's expression wavered, the facade she had maintained beginning to crack. Malik could see the conflict within her, the fear that had driven her to make such a harsh accusation. The tension in the room hung thick, waiting for a resolution, for a moment of clarity. As the meeting drew to a close, Malik felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the turning point. The truth was struggling to emerge from the shadows, and he was determined to help it find its way into the light. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the neatly trimmed lawns of the suburban neighborhood. The late afternoon air was thick with tension, and Malik could feel it wrapping around him like a heavy blanket. He stood at the edge of his driveway, staring down the street where Ethan's house loomed. The laughter and camaraderie they had shared just hours before felt like a distant memory, replaced now with an oppressive silence that echoed the weight of Clara's accusation. "Are you coming over?" Ethan called from the porch, his voice tinged with uncertainty. He was shifting his weight from one foot to the other, clearly torn between his loyalty to Malik and the fear of his mother's wrath. Malik hesitated. "I don't know, man. Your mom. She's just upset, Malik. Let me talk to her." "It's not your fault." "Yeah, but she thinks I stole her grandmother's pearls. How am I supposed to just walk in there like everything's fine?" Malik's voice cracked slightly, revealing the hurt that festered beneath his bravado. Ethan stepped down from the porch, closing the distance between them. "You're my best friend. I'll make her see reason. Just come, please." His eyes were wide with desperation, and Malik could see the glimmer of hope in them. Taking a deep breath, Malik nodded. "Okay, let's do it." As they approached the front door, Malik's heart raced with each step. He'd faced challenges before, growing up in a neighborhood where he was often judged by the color of his skin rather than the content of his character, but this felt different. This was betrayal, and it cut deeper than anything he had experienced. Ethan knocked lightly, and the door opened almost immediately, revealing Clara's tense expression. The lines on her forehead deepened as she took in the sight of Malik standing beside her son. "Ethan, I told you I don't want to talk to him. Mom, please. Just hear him out," Ethan pleaded, his voice rising a notch. "He didn't do anything. Then why was he the last person in the house before it disappeared?" Clara shot back, frustration bubbling just below the surface. Malik took a step forward, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I swear I didn't take your pearls. I came over to play basketball, and I left right after. I would never steal from you." Clara crossed her arms, her posture defensive. "It doesn't matter what you say. You're a stranger in this neighborhood, and my instincts tell me to be careful." "A stranger? I've known Ethan since we were kids." Malik's patience began to fray. "You don't know me, but you're quick to judge." "Enough." Clara's voice thundered, cutting through the tension. "You need to leave, Malik. I won't have you here when I'm still trying to figure this out." Ethan's face fell, his eyes darting between his mother and his best friend. "Mom, you're not being fair. You've known Malik for years. You can't just throw accusations at him without proof." "Proof? What proof do I have?" "All I have is my gut feeling," Clara retorted, her voice rising. "And you should be on my side, Ethan. I'm your mother." Malik felt a pang in his chest as he watched Ethan's expression shift from anger to despair. He was caught in the middle, forced to choose between family loyalty and the truth he knew. "Ethan, it's okay," Malik said softly, trying to ease the burden on his friend. "You don't have to defend me." "No, I'm not giving up on you," Ethan insisted, stepping forward. "This isn't right." "You know it isn't." Clara's eyes softened for a brief moment, but the hardness returned quickly. "You're just a kid, Ethan. You don't understand the world like I do. People like Malik. Ethan interrupted. "What does that even mean, Mom?" "Just because he's different from us." Clara flinched at her son's words, realizing the implications of her own biases. "I just want to protect you. I don't want you to get hurt." "Hurt? Or you don't want to face the truth?" Ethan shot back, frustration mounting. "You're making a mistake. You're letting your fear cloud your judgment." Malik stood in silence as mother and son faced off, the tension in the air palpable. He could feel the tears threatening to spill from his eyes as he watched the rift grow between them, a rift he never wanted to be a part of. "Ethan," Clara finally said, her voice quieter now, "you don't understand. I've seen things. I've heard things. I can't just ignore my instincts." "Your instincts are wrong," Ethan replied, his voice cracking with emotion. "You're hurting someone who's done nothing but be there for me." The silence that followed was deafening. Clara turned away, her expression unreadable, and Malik felt a flicker of hope. Maybe there was a chance for understanding, for reconciliation. "Why don't we just sit down?" Malik suggested, his voice steady. "We can talk this through. I can tell you about my life, my dreams. You can see I'm not what you think I am." Clara hesitated, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I don't know, Malik. I'm scared. I've seen the worst in people, and it's hard to shake that fear. Then let me show you the best, Malik replied earnestly. I'm not just some stereotype. I'm a person with hopes and dreams, just like you. Ethan's face lit up with a spark of hope as he watched his mother's resolve waver. Mom, please, give him a chance. Let's listen to him. Clara took a deep breath, the weight of her fears pressing down on her. Okay, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Let's talk. As they moved inside, Malik felt a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. He had no idea how the conversation would unfold, but he was determined to show Clara the truth behind the prejudice that had clouded her judgment. The living room was adorned with family photos, the walls echoing with memories of laughter and love. Malik took a seat on the edge of the couch, while Ethan positioned himself between his mother and his friend, a silent guardian of the fragile peace. Tell me about yourself, Malik, Clara said, her voice still shaky. Malik nodded, grateful for the opportunity. I'm 16, and I love basketball. I want to be a professional player one day. It's my dream. He paused, searching for the right words. But I also want to give back to my community. I want to help people. Clara's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of curiosity breaking through her apprehension. How do you plan to do that? I volunteer at the community center, Malik continued, the passion in his voice growing. I coach younger kids. I want to show them they can achieve their dreams, no matter where they come from or what they look like. Ethan chimed in, his enthusiasm palpable. Malik's really good at it. He inspires them, Mom. He's not just some kid from the neighborhood. He's a role model. Clara's expression softened as she listened, the tension in her shoulders easing ever so slightly. I didn't know that. Most people don't, Malik said, his tone gentle. They see the color of my skin, and they make assumptions. But I'm just like anyone else. I want to be seen for who I am, not what I look like. As the conversation unfolded, Malik slowly began to see the walls around Clara's heart start to crumble. The fear that had driven her to accuse him was slowly being replaced by understanding. He shared stories of his childhood, the challenges he faced, and the dreams that fueled him. He spoke about the beauty of friendship and the importance of standing up for one another, no matter the odds. Clara listened intently, her gaze shifting from skepticism to empathy. I guess I let my fears take over, she admitted, her voice breaking slightly. I've always worried about protecting Ethan, but I never stopped to think about how my actions might hurt someone else. Malik smiled gently, sensing the shift. It's okay. We all have fears. It's how we deal with them that matters. Ethan leaned forward, his eyes shining with hope. Mom, can we try to be better? Can we learn from this? I don't want to lose my best friend over something that could have been avoided. Clara nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I'm so sorry, Malik. I should have trusted Ethan and given you the benefit of the doubt. My instincts were wrong. As the weight of Clara's admission hung in the air, Malik felt a wave of relief wash over him. He knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but this moment marked a pivotal turning point, a chance for healing and understanding. Thank you for saying that, Mrs. Rodriguez. It means a lot to me. In that moment, Malik realized that even in the shadows of prejudice, there was always a glimmer of hope waiting to break through. And it was through conversations like this, filled with honesty, vulnerability, and the willingness to listen, that true change could begin. The sun hung low in the afternoon sky, casting long shadows across the neighborhood as Malik sat on the steps of his porch, staring at the pavement beneath his feet. The world around him had changed in a matter of hours, and he could still feel the sting of Clara's accusation burning in his chest. The laughter and joy he had shared with Ethan earlier that day felt like a distant memory now, overshadowed by the weight of mistrust that loomed large over him. Ethan had promised to talk to his mother, but Malik knew that words could only bridge the gap so far. The silence between them felt heavy, as if the air itself was thick with unspoken doubts. Just then, a figure appeared at the end of the street. It was Ethan, walking slowly, his head downcast. Malik's heart raced. He hoped for good news, but the look on Ethan's face told him otherwise. Hey, Ethan said softly as he approached, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. Malik could see the conflict written all over his friend's face. Did you talk to her? Malik asked, trying to keep his voice steady, though a tremor betrayed the anxiety swirling within him. Ethan nodded slowly, his eyes flickering with uncertainty. I tried, but she wouldn't listen. She just kept saying she knew it was you, that you were the only one who could have taken it. Malik felt a lump form in his throat. How can she think that? I would never do something like that, Ethan. You know me. I know, Ethan replied, his voice breaking slightly. But she's scared, Malik. She's scared of what people will think. You know how it is around here. If she admits she was wrong, she feels like she'll lose everything. Lose everything? Malik echoed, incredulous. What about me? What about my reputation? My life? It's like she's not even considering that. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but the words seemed to catch in his throat. He looked away, ashamed. Malik felt a wave of frustration wash over him, mixed with an aching sadness for the friend he felt slipping away. Malik, please, Ethan said finally, desperation creeping into his tone. I don't want to lose you as a friend. You're like a brother to me. But my mom, she's my mom, you know? I can't just turn my back on her. Then you're choosing her over me, Malik said bitterly, the sting of betrayal cutting deeper than he expected. You're choosing to believe her over your own best friend. I'm not. Ethan started, but Malik cut him off. Then what are you doing, Ethan? What are you doing to help me? Malik's voice rose, a mix of anger and heartache. You're just standing there, letting her feed you these lies like they're gospel. How can you not see that? Ethan flinched at Malik's words, his brow furrowing with guilt. I want to help you, I really do. I don't know how. Malik stood up abruptly, his heart pounding in his chest. You don't have to choose sides. Just tell her the truth. Tell her who I really am. I'm not some criminal. I'm just a kid trying to make it through high school, just like you. Ethan took a step back, his eyes wide. I will. I promise I'll try again, but you have to understand. She's really upset right now. Upset? Malik laughed harshly, the sound bitter on his tongue. You think I'm not upset? You think I'm just going to sit here and let her ruin my life because she can't see past her own fears? I'm sorry, Malik. Ethan's voice was barely above a whisper, filled with regret. I didn't mean, forget it, Malik snapped, turning away from his friend. Just forget it. As Malik walked into the house, he could feel the weight of Ethan's gaze on his back, but he didn't look back. He couldn't. The sight of his friend's hurt expression would only make him feel worse. Inside, the walls felt like they were closing in around him, and he sank onto the sofa, his hands covering his face. He was trapped in a nightmare that he couldn't wake up from. Time passed in a blur, the sounds of the outside world fading into a dull hum. Malik's parents were at work, and the house felt eerily quiet. He picked up his phone, scrolling through social media, but the posts felt like a cruel reminder of his isolation. Friends had started to unfollow him, and the comments on his last few posts dripped with suspicion. Maybe it was him, one read. He always seemed a bit off. Did you hear about the pearls? I knew something was up with that Malik kid. With a surge of frustration, Malik tossed his phone across the room, where it landed with a dull thud against the wall. He stood up, pacing back and forth, his thoughts racing. How could this be happening? Why was nobody willing to believe him? Just then, the doorbell rang, breaking the suffocating silence. Malik hesitated, fear bubbling in his chest. He didn't want to face anyone, especially not someone who might add to the doubts swirling around him. But the ringing persisted, insistent and impatient. With a deep breath, he opened the door, revealing a familiar face, Mrs. Thompson from 2 doors down, an elderly woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. She was always baking cookies or tending to her garden, bringing a little sunshine to the neighborhood. Malik, dear, she exclaimed, her voice a comforting presence. I just wanted to check on you. I heard about what happened with Clara. Are you okay? Malik forced a smile, though it felt painful. I'm managing Mrs. Thompson, just trying to figure things out. Oh, sweetheart. She stepped closer, her eyes searching his. I know how people can be. Don't let it get to you. You're a good boy, and I know you would never do such a thing. Thank you, he replied, his heart warming at her words. but it's hard. It feels like nobody believes me. Sometimes people let their fears cloud their judgment, she said gently. But you have to hold on to the truth, Malik. Stand tall. You have people who care about you. Malik nodded, feeling a flicker of hope. I just wish I could make them see that. I just want to be treated fairly. Mrs. Thompson placed a hand on his shoulder, her grip firm and reassuring. You will be. These things take time. Just remember, dear, that shadows can only exist where there is light. And you have that light within you. As she turned to leave, Malik felt a sense of renewed determination. He wouldn't let Clara's unfounded accusations define him. He would fight for his truth, not just for himself, but for all those who had ever been misjudged or misunderstood. That night, Malik lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thoughts swirling in his mind. He replayed the events of the day, the pain of betrayal, the warmth of Mrs. Thompson's kindness, and the unwavering bond he had once shared with Ethan. He knew that the road ahead would be tough, but he was ready to take that first step toward reclaiming his life and his dignity. Tomorrow, he would face the world, not as a victim of prejudice, but as a young man determined to make his voice heard. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an orange hue across the suburban neighborhood as people began to gather for the community meeting. Malik sat in the back of the crowded room, his heart pounding in his chest. The fluorescent lights flickered above him, mirroring the uncertainty and anxiety that swirled within. He could hear the murmur of voices, some sympathetic, others laced with judgment. The walls felt like they were closing in, pressing against him as he waited for the moment that he would have to stand up and speak. Ethan was seated a few rows ahead, his posture tense, shoulders hunched as if he were trying to disappear into his seat. Malik's gaze lingered on his friend, the boy who had once stood beside him on the basketball court, sharing laughter and dreams of the future. Now, that friendship felt like a fragile thread, ready to snap under the weight of accusations and misunderstandings. Both boys had faced the same world, yet the color of Malik's skin had turned it into a battlefield. As the meeting began, Clara stood at the front, her face pale and drawn. The murmurs quieted, and she cleared her throat, attempting to project confidence. Thank you all for coming, she began, her voice wavering. I know this is an important conversation for our community. She glanced at Malik, her eyes filled with a mix of guilt and defiance. I want to talk about the incident that happened last week. The missing pearl necklace. Malik felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had rehearsed what he wanted to say 1,000 times, yet the words felt heavy and stuck in his throat. Clara continued, her words cutting through his thoughts. I was wrong to accuse Malik. I let my fears cloud my judgment. I thought I was protecting my family, my home. She took a deep breath, and the room remained silent, hanging on her every word. But in doing so, I heard an innocent person. A murmur of shock rippled through the crowd. Malik's heart raced. He could feel the eyes of the community on him, some sympathetic, others skeptical. Clara's admission seemed to stir something in the room, a flicker of understanding mixed with disbelief. I didn't want to believe that someone I knew, someone who played with my son, could do something like that, Clara continued, her voice gaining strength. But that was wrong. I acted on my assumptions and stereotypes. I'm sorry, Malik. Her eyes welled up with tears, and for the first time, Malik saw a woman stripped of her defenses, vulnerable and human. Malik stood up slowly, the wooden floor creaking beneath him. He could feel every gaze on him, the weight of their scrutiny pressing down like a heavy cloak. He took a deep breath, steadied himself, and began to speak. Thank you for your honesty, Clara, he said, his voice trembling at first but growing firmer. But I also want to share my side of the story. He paused, searching for the right words. I've lived here my entire life. I've gone to school with Ethan, played basketball in our streets, and been part of this community. I never thought I would be treated like this. He glanced at Ethan, who looked torn, his face a mix of shame and empathy. When you accused me, Clara, it felt like all those years of friendship were erased in an instant. It hurt. A woman in the front row nodded, her expression softening. We need to listen to him, she whispered to her neighbor, who looked uncertain. Malik continued, his voice gaining momentum. I didn't just lose my reputation. I felt like I lost my identity. The moment you accused me of stealing, it was as if I was being reduced to a stereotype, a narrative that you chose to believe over knowing me. He glanced around the room, gauging the reactions. I've faced racism before. It's a shadow that follows you, no matter how hard you try to escape it. Clara's expression shifted from guilt to understanding. Malik, I didn't realize the pain my words would cause, she admitted, her voice cracking. I was so caught up in my own fears that I didn't consider yours. The room was silent, the tension palpable. Malik felt the weight of the moment, the gravity of the truth hanging in the air. I want to believe that we can move past this, he said, his heart racing. But it's going to take more than apologies. It's going to take a commitment from all of us to change the way we see each other. A man in the back, his arms crossed, scoffed. But how do we know this won't happen again? How do we know Malik isn't just trying to play the victim? Malik turned to face him, his resolve unshaken. You can choose to believe what you want, but I'm standing here today, not just for myself, but for every person who has ever been judged without a fair chance. We need to have these conversations, openly and honestly. We need to face our prejudices and learn from them. Ethan finally stood, his voice breaking through the tension. I've known Malik my whole life. He's my best friend. I should have stood up for him when this all started. I let fear dictate my actions instead of my heart. He turned to Malik, his eyes filled with remorse. I'm sorry, man. I should have had your back. Malik's heart swelled, a flicker of hope igniting within him. Thank you, Ethan. That means a lot. The two boys exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. They were both learning in this moment, navigating the complexities of friendship and societal expectations. Clara wiped her tears, stepping forward. I want to do better, she stated firmly. I want to listen to understand. I don't want to be the person who allows fear to dictate my actions anymore. A woman in the front row spoke up, her voice steady. We need to create a space for dialogue. We need to confront our biases and support one another. Others began nodding in agreement, the atmosphere slowly shifting from one of tension to collective resolve. As the meeting drew on, Malik felt a sense of camaraderie begin to form within the room. They were all flawed individuals, grappling with their prejudices and fears, yet they were willing to confront them together. The shadows of misunderstanding were beginning to lift, revealing the potential for growth and healing. After the meeting, as people began to disperse, Malik felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Clara. Thank you for sharing your truth, she said softly. I hope we can rebuild what's been broken. Malik smiled, a genuine warmth spreading through him. I hope so too. It's going to take time, but I believe we can do it. He glanced at Ethan, who stood nearby, a tentative smile on his face. Together, as they walked out of the community center, Malik felt lighter. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a glimmer of hope. The shadows of prejudice were still there, but they were beginning to fade, replaced by the light of understanding and empathy. The journey toward healing had just begun, and Malik was ready to take the next step. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden hue over the suburban neighborhood as the community gathered for the emergency meeting called by Clara. News of the incident had spread like wildfire, igniting a wave of tension that rippled through the once peaceful streets. Malik stood at the back of the community center, his heart pounding in his chest. He felt the weight of dozens of eyes on him, some filled with sympathy, others with suspicion. As the crowd settled into their seats, Ethan shuffled nervously beside him. You okay? He whispered, glancing at Malik with a mixture of concern and guilt. Malik forced a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. Yeah, just ready to get this over with. Me too, Ethan replied, his voice barely a murmur. It was clear that he was wrestling with the aftermath of his mother's accusations, the rift growing between them as each minute ticked by. The room was filled with murmurs and whispers as Clara took her place at the front. She cleared her throat, her hands trembling slightly as she grasped the podium. The tension was palpable, the air thick with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. Thank you all for coming, Clara began, her voice shaky but determined. I know this is a difficult situation, and I appreciate everyone being here to discuss it. She paused, looking down for a moment, collecting her thoughts. As many of you know, my grandmother's pearl necklace went missing and I accused Malik of taking it. Gasps echoed through the room, and Malik felt a wave of anger surge within him. He fought to keep his expression neutral, but the hurt was etched across his face. I should have never jumped to conclusions, Clara continued, her voice cracking. I acted out of fear and ignorance. I've lived in this neighborhood for years, and I let my own prejudices cloud my judgment. At that moment, Malik's heart sank. He could see the pain on Ethan's face, the deep conflict within him as he listened to his mother. Clara, you need to understand that what you did has serious consequences, a voice boomed from the crowd. It was Mr. Thompson, the elderly neighbor who had witnessed the events unfold. You've put a stain on that boy's reputation, and it's not something that can be easily erased. I know, Clara replied, tears brimming in her eyes. And I'm so sorry, Malik. I can't imagine how this has affected you. Malik's voice caught in his throat as he looked down at the floor. He was flooded with emotions, hurt, betrayal, and a flicker of hope that perhaps this meeting could bring some clarity. He took a deep breath, steeling himself before stepping forward. Can I say something? Malik asked, his voice steady but low. Clara nodded, wiping her eyes with a tissue. Please go ahead. Malik cleared his throat, the room falling silent. I'm not here to make you feel worse, Clara. But what you did hurt me deeply. I've worked hard to build a good name for myself. I've tried to be a good friend and a good person, and then one accusation turned everything upside down. Ethan shifted uncomfortably beside him, guilt gnawing at his insides. He wished he could take back the moments of hesitation when he should have defended Malik against his mother's accusations. I know you didn't mean to hurt me, Malik continued, his voice gaining strength. But it's not just about the necklace. It's about how easily people can turn against someone because of fear or prejudice. That's what hurts the most. The crowd was silent, absorbing his words. A few people exchanged glances, realizing the deeper implications of Malik's statement. Clara's face fell as she heard the truth in his words. I've faced my share of judgment in this neighborhood, and it's exhausting, Malik added, his heart racing. Every time something goes missing or something goes wrong, I feel like I have to carry that weight on my shoulders. It's not just me, it's everyone who looks like me. Ethan finally found his voice. Malik, he started, but Malik raised a hand to stop him. Ethan, it's okay. You were caught in the middle. I just wish you had trusted me, Malik said, his gaze softening. But I understand. We're all learning, right? Clara took a deep breath, her face reflecting shame and regret. I can't apologize enough for what I've done. I let my fears control me, and that's not an excuse. I want to do better. I want to understand more. Malik nodded, feeling a flicker of hope. It starts with conversations like this, he replied. We need to talk, to listen, to really see each other. The only way to break these cycles is through honesty. The room began to buzz with murmurs as others began to weigh in. One woman stood up, her voice trembling. I've seen this happen before. We can't let our biases dictate our actions. We need to be better. I want to be better. Malik smiled, inspired by her words. It's not easy, but we can try. We have to. It's about building trust again, not just between us, but in our community as a whole. Clara looked around the room, her heart heavy yet hopeful. Let's make a pact to listen more, to question our assumptions, and to support each other. I want to help create a safe space where everyone feels valued. The crowd murmured in agreement, the tension beginning to dissolve as they embraced the idea of accountability and understanding. Malik felt a surge of emotion as he looked around at familiar faces. I want to help too, he said, his voice firm. I want to share my story, and I want to hear yours. We all have experiences that shape who we are. We can learn from each other. The meeting continued, filled with discussions about community bonds and the need for empathy. One by one, people began to share their own stories of prejudice and misunderstanding, revealing the scars that had formed over the years. As Malik listened, he felt a sense of relief wash over him. The truth was emerging, and while it was painful, it was also healing. He could see that the community was ready to confront their biases, ready to work together towards a better understanding of one another. And in that moment, Malik realized that though the road ahead would be long and filled with challenges, it was a road worth traveling. The shadows of prejudice could be illuminated by the light of conversation and connection, and he was determined to be part of that change. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the community center as the townsfolk gathered for the meeting. Malik stood at the edge of the crowd, his heart pounding in his chest. The voices around him buzzed with tension and uncertainty, a mixture of support and skepticism. He had never imagined he would find himself in such a position, standing before the very people who had once cheered him on at basketball games and school events, now divided over the accusation that threatened to tear apart his life. "Why are we even here?" a voice called out from the back. It was Mr. Thompson, an older man known for his sharp tongue. "This is just a waste of time. Malik's a thief, plain and simple. We don't need to discuss this any further." Malik's stomach twisted at the accusation, the weight of his circumstances pressing down on him like an anchor. He felt Ethan's presence beside him, a silent support in a storm of chaos. Ethan's face was pale, caught between loyalty to his mother and his friendship with Malik. Malik turned to him, seeking some reassurance, but all he found was a look of confusion. "Ethan, you know I didn't take it," Malik whispered, his voice barely audible over the murmurs of the crowd. "I know," Ethan replied, his brow furrowed. "But my mom, she's so convinced. I just don't know how to fix this." Malik nodded, his heart heavy. He understood that Ethan was caught in a web of family loyalty and prejudice, and he couldn't fault him for it. But the pain of betrayal stabbed deeper than any accusation could wound. The room was filled with familiar faces, but they felt like strangers now. "People, please." Clara's voice rang out, cutting through the murmurs. She stood at the front, her face a mask of distress. "I know I may have acted hastily, but we need to talk about this rationally." Rationally?" Mr. Thompson scoffed. "You've already made your choice. You chose to blame that boy instead of confronting your own mistakes." Malik flinched at the insult. It felt as though the entire community was watching him, their eyes judging, their minds filled with preconceived notions. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his emotions threatening to spill over. It was time to speak. He stepped forward, feeling the tension in the air coil around him. "I didn't steal anything," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've worked hard for everything I have. I've never taken from anyone. And you all know that." The crowd fell silent, eyes shifting between Malik and Clara. He could see Clara's face crumple, the guilt washing over her as she realized the implications of her accusations. Malik pressed on, his heart racing. "You don't know me, not really. You see the color of my skin, and you make assumptions. I may be different from you, but that doesn't make me a criminal." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some faces softened, while others remained hardened by the weight of their biases. Clara's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and Malik could see the struggle within her. She was fighting against the very prejudices she had unknowingly fostered. "Malik," Ethan finally spoke up, his voice breaking through the tension. "I know you're my best friend, and I want to believe you. But what, Ethan?" Malik interrupted, a mix of anger and hurt spilling over. "What more do I need to do to prove I didn't take that collar? Why is my word not enough?" Ethan's face twisted in anguish. "Because my mom is scared. She's scared of what she doesn't understand. I don't know how to make her see that you're not a threat, that you're my friend." "Fear doesn't justify betrayal," Malik shot back, his voice rising. "You're my friend too, Ethan. But what does it say about you if you stand by and let this happen?" The room was thick with tension, and for a moment, it seemed as if the air itself would crack under the pressure of their emotions. Clara took a step forward, her own anguish evident. "I never wanted this to happen. I just wanted to protect my family." "By accusing an innocent person?" Malik challenged, his heart racing. "You think that's protection? That's just perpetuating the cycle of fear and hate." "Malik, please," Clara pleaded, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just saw the collar missing and I panicked. I know it wasn't right, but my mind went to the worst possible scenario." Malik shook his head, his heart aching for the woman who had been like a second mother to him. "Clara, I understand fear. I live it every day. but that doesn't give you the right to take away my dignity. I'm not a criminal because of the color of my skin." The crowd began to shift, some nodding in agreement, others still grappling with their internal conflicts. Malik could feel a change in the air, a shift from suspicion to reflection. He glanced at Ethan, whose face was a blend of regret and determination. "I want to stand by you, Malik. I need my mom to understand." "Then help her understand," Malik urged, his voice softening. "You have to be the bridge, Ethan. You have to help her see me for who I am, not what she fears." As the murmurs of the crowd faded into a contemplative silence, Clara took a deep breath, her resolve slowly building. I need to apologize," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Malik, I'm so sorry. I allowed my fears and prejudices to cloud my judgment, and I hurt you in the process. You didn't deserve that." Malik felt a wave of mixed emotions wash over him. "It's not just about me, Clara. It's about understanding that we all have biases. We need to confront them together, not let them divide us." Clara nodded, her tears spilling over as she took a step closer to Malik. "I want to do better. I want to learn. Will you help me?" Malik didn't hesitate. "Of course. But it starts with listening, truly listening to each other." The crowd began to stir with a sense of shared purpose. The tension that had once filled the room began to dissipate, replaced by an atmosphere ripe for dialogue and understanding. Malik glanced around, seeing faces that had once looked upon him with suspicion, now filled with empathy. "Let's talk," he said, his heart steadying as he took a deep breath. "Let's share our stories, our fears, and our hopes. Because that's the only way we can truly heal." As the crowd began to nod in agreement, Malik felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, they could turn this painful moment into a catalyst for change. The shadows of prejudice were long, but together, they could shine a light bright enough to break through. Malik stood in the center of the room, the weight of the community's eyes heavy upon him. The air was thick with tension, a palpable mix of anger, confusion, and hope. He could feel the heat of embarrassment creeping up his neck, but he pushed through, determined to speak his truth. Ethan sat in the front row, his hands gripping the edges of the seat, his knuckles white. He felt torn, the loyalty to his best friend warring against the instinct to defend his mother. He had seen the hurt in Malik's eyes, but could he really stand up against Clara? The thought made him sick to his stomach. The community meeting had been called in response to the accusations swirling around Malik like a storm cloud. Residents filled the room, some casting wary glances toward Malik, while others whispered amongst themselves. Clara stood off to the side, her face pale, her expression a mixture of regret and defiance. She had never intended for it to come to this, her son's best friend being accused of theft simply because she had acted out of fear. "Thank you all for coming," the moderator, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Johnson, said, her voice steady but laced with concern. "We're here to discuss the recent incident involving Malik and the missing pearl necklace. This is an opportunity for dialogue, understanding, and hopefully resolution." Malik took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his heart in the pit of his stomach. He stepped forward slightly, the murmurs fading into an expectant silence. "I appreciate the chance to speak," he said, his voice trembling but resolute. "I never thought I'd be standing here, defending myself against something I didn't do. I've lived in this neighborhood my whole life. I've worked hard, gone to school, and tried to be a good friend." He paused, searching for the right words, and glanced at Ethan, who looked as if he was about to burst. "Ethan has always been there for me, and it hurts to think that our friendship could be torn apart because of a misunderstanding, because of fear." Clara shifted uncomfortably, her heart aching as she listened to Malik's words. She had never meant for it to escalate like this. The shame gnawed at her insides, and she wanted nothing more than to reach out to him, to explain, but she felt paralyzed by her own mistakes. "I know that sometimes people see me and make assumptions about who I am," Malik continued, his voice gaining strength. "But I am not a thief. I've never stolen anything in my life. This necklace, it's a symbol of my friendship with Ethan. It's a part of our history." The room was silent, all eyes fixed on Malik. He could see the conflict on Ethan's face, the way he looked back and forth between Malik and his mother, struggling to reconcile the two. I just want you all to know that accusations can change a person's life, Malik said, his voice breaking slightly. They can destroy friendships, families, and communities. We need to do better. We need to trust each other. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, and Mrs. Johnson nodded, encouraging Malik to continue. What happened here is about more than just a necklace. It's about how we see each other. It's about prejudice. I know things have happened in the past that make people wary, but we can't let those fears dictate how we treat one another. Ethan finally stood, his heart racing. Malik's right. My mom. She was scared, and I get that, but she didn't even give him a chance. She just assumed the worst because of the color of his skin. His voice cracked, and he felt a wave of emotion wash over him. I can't believe this is what it's come to. Don't you dare speak to me like that, Ethan. Clara shot back, her voice rising defensively. You don't understand what it's like to be a parent, to worry about your child's safety. I was just trying to protect you. But at what cost, Mom? Ethan retorted, anger flaring in his chest. You put our friendship at stake. You didn't even think to ask him what happened. You just assumed he was guilty. He turned to Malik, his eyes pleading. I'm so sorry, Malik. I should have stood up for you sooner. Malik felt a rush of gratitude mixed with sadness. He appreciated Ethan's support, but the damage was done. It's okay, Ethan, he said softly. I know you didn't want this to happen. We've been friends for so long. I just wish it didn't have to be like this. Clara stepped forward, her heart heavy with the realization of her actions. Malik, I'm so sorry, she said, her voice choked with emotion. I let my fears blind me. I never meant to hurt you. I should have trusted you. I should have listened. The room remained silent, the tension thick as everyone waited for Malik's response. It's hard to just forgive, Clara, he finally said, his voice steady but pained. You don't know how much this has affected me. I felt judged and alone. You took something from me that I can't get back. I know, Clara whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right. I want to learn to understand. Please help me to do that. Malik took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. If we're going to move forward, we need to have real conversations. We need to talk about our biases, our fears, and how they affect our lives. I'm willing to be a part of that conversation if you are. Ethan nodded eagerly, stepping up beside Malik. I want to help too. This isn't just about the necklace. It's about our community and how we treat each other. We can't let fear dictate our friendships. Mrs. Johnson finally broke the silence, her voice firm and reassuring. It takes courage to admit when we're wrong. Clara, Malik, Ethan, you've all shown that courage today. Let's work together to create a space where we can all feel safe and respected. A slow wave of applause began to ripple through the room, and Malik felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. Maybe this was the start of something meaningful. As the meeting continued, discussions flourished, and people began to share their own experiences with prejudice. Malik listened intently, absorbing the stories of others, stories that echoed his own. He felt a sense of solidarity in the room, a shared understanding that transcended their differences. It was a glimmer of what could be, a community united, willing to confront the shadows that had long lingered. As the meeting drew to a close, Clara approached Malik, her expression earnest. I want to do better, she said, her voice steady. I want to be an ally. Can we start over? Malik looked into her eyes, seeing the sincerity in her plea. It's going to take time, Clara. Trust isn't easily rebuilt, but I'm willing to try if you are. Clara nodded, hope flickering in her chest. I am. Thank you for giving me that chance. As the room began to empty, Malik felt a newfound strength within him. He had turned a painful moment into an opportunity for change. The shadows of prejudice still lingered, but he could see the light beginning to break through. And in that moment, he knew he wasn't just fighting for his own innocence. He was fighting for the future of his community, one conversation at a time. As sunbeams filtered through the branches of the oak trees lining the street, casting playful shadows on the pavement as Malik stood before the assembly of neighbors in the community center. The air was thick with anticipation, each person seated in the small folding chairs murmuring softly, casting curious glances toward him. He felt the weight of their stares pressing down on him, a mix of sympathy and skepticism that seemed palpable. For Malik, this was not just a meeting. It was a chance to reclaim his dignity, to share his truth, and to confront the prejudices that had marred his life. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice slightly trembling but firm. He took a deep breath, trying to quell the fluttering in his stomach. "I know this is a difficult time for everyone, but I need to speak my truth." He scanned the room, his gaze landing on Ethan, who sat at the front, his expression a mixture of guilt and concern. Malik and Ethan had been best friends for as long as he could remember, but their bond had been strained since the accusations began. As Malik spoke, he could see the conflict in Ethan's eyes, a battle between loyalty to his mother and his friendship with Malik. "Last week, I was accused of stealing something that means the world to someone else," Malik continued, the words spilling out like a dam breaking. "Clara, Ethan's mom, thought I took her grandmother's pearl necklace. And I'm not here to deny that it hurt when she pointed the finger at me. It hurt a lot." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, and Malik felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps they were beginning to understand. He took a step closer to the mic, leaning in slightly as he poured out his heart. "But what I want to talk about is not just that accusation. It's about the deeper issue, the prejudices that led to it, the way people see me because of the color of my skin." The atmosphere shifted as he spoke. Faces softened, and some audience members exchanged glances. A woman in the back, her arms crossed, began to uncross them, leaning forward with interest. "I'm just a kid from this neighborhood, like many of you," Malik continued, voice rising with passion. "I have dreams. I want to go to college, become a writer, maybe even change the world someday. But every time something like this happens, it feels like those dreams are slipping further away. I didn't grow up in a world where everyone sees me the same," he said, feeling a rush of emotion swell in his chest. "I've been followed in stores, called names, and treated like I'm less than human. And when Clara accused me, it was like all those experiences came crashing down on me at once." Malik's eyes glistened as he spoke, and he noticed a few people wiping away tears. He took a moment to compose himself, gathering his thoughts, and pushed forward. "I want to give Clara the chance to explain her side too. I know she's not a bad person. We all have our fears and biases, but we also have the power to confront them." The room fell silent as Clara stood up slowly, her face pale, but her posture straight. "Malik," she started, her voice shaking. "I owe you an apology. I let my fears take control, and I acted without thinking. I should have trusted you, and I didn't. I'm so sorry." Malik nodded, acknowledging her sincerity. "Thank you, Clara. It means a lot that you're here and willing to talk about this. I was scared," Clara continued, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I've always been taught to be cautious, to protect my family. But I see now that I made a mistake, and it hurt you in ways I can't begin to understand." Ethan, unable to remain silent any longer, stood and faced the crowd. "I should have stood up for Malik sooner," he said, his voice breaking. "I was so torn between my loyalty to my mom and my friendship with him. But Malik is my brother. I've known him forever, and I should have believed in him." The community center felt charged with emotion, the air thick with the weight of shared experiences. Malik looked around, feeling a sense of solidarity beginning to build. "We all carry our own experiences, and it shapes how we see the world," he said. "But we can learn from each other. This can't just be about me or Clara. It has to be about all of us." A man in the back stood up, a middle-aged neighbor Malik recognized but had never spoken to. "You're right, Malik," he said, his voice steady. "I've lived here for years, and I've seen how fear can twist our perceptions. I've been guilty of it too. It's time we have these hard conversations, not just when something happens, but all the time." The crowd murmured in agreement, and Malik felt a surge of hope. Maybe they could indeed change the narrative. "What if we started a community group?" he suggested, a spark igniting in his chest. "A place where we can share our stories, confront our biases, and learn from each other?" "Yes," Clara exclaimed, wiping her tears. "I would love to be a part of that. We can't just let this moment pass. We need to do something meaningful." Ethan nodded vigorously. "Count me in. If we can come together and understand each other better, Maybe we can prevent stuff like this from happening again." The atmosphere shifted dramatically, a sense of unity blossoming in the room. People began to engage with one another, sharing their thoughts and ideas. The proposal for a community dialogue group sparked excitement, and for the first time in days, Malik felt a sense of relief wash over him. He had turned a moment of deep pain into a powerful opportunity for healing. As the meeting continued, Malik felt lighter, buoyed by the support of his friends and neighbors. He realized that while the journey ahead would not be easy, it was a necessary step toward building a more understanding and compassionate community. And in that moment, beneath the fluorescent lights of the community center, Malik understood that although shadows of prejudice might linger, they had the power to bring forth the light of understanding, healing, and hope. As evening descended upon the suburban neighborhood, casting long shadows across the neatly trimmed lawns, Malik stood at the edge of the basketball court, staring at the ground. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the sky transformed into a deep indigo, dotted with the first stars of the night. The earlier warmth of the day had given way to a cool breeze, but Malik felt no comfort in it. His heart was heavy, and the weight of the accusations hung over him like a storm cloud. Across the court, Ethan sat on the bleachers, his head bowed as he wrestled with his thoughts. They had been friends for years, sharing laughter and dreams, but now a chasm had formed between them, deepened by the events of the past few days. Malik could sense the turmoil emanating from Ethan, and it pained him to see his friend caught in the middle of this whirlwind of mistrust and prejudice. "Ethan," Malik finally called out, his voice barely louder than a whisper. "Can we talk?" Ethan looked up, his eyes filled with a mix of guilt and confusion. "I don't know, Malik. My mom, she's really upset. I don't want to make it worse." Malik took a step forward, the gravel crunching beneath his sneakers. "You're not making it worse. You're my friend. I need you to believe me." "I do believe you, Malik," Ethan exclaimed, frustration breaking through his hesitation. "But my mom is convinced you took that necklace. She's been crying and what about me?" Malik interrupted, his voice rising with emotion. "What about how I feel? You're my best friend, and you're just standing there while your mom, she's scared." Ethan shouted, his own voice cracking under the strain. "She thinks someone's trying to steal from us. You have to understand that." "Understand." Malik's heart raced, his fists clenched at his sides. "You think I'm some kind of criminal? I've known you my whole life, Ethan. I would never do that to you or your family." Ethan's gaze dropped, and he ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of despair. I know. But she's my mom. I can't just ignore what she says." "Then what do you want me to do?" Malik asked, his voice softening. "Just sit here and let everyone think I'm a thief? Let them ruin my life." The silence that followed was deafening. The weight of unspoken words hung heavily in the air, thickening the tension between them. Malik could feel the familiarity of their friendship slipping away, replaced by an uncomfortable rift that neither of them knew how to bridge. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know, Malik. I just wish this would all go away." As the night deepened, Malik turned away, feeling the sting of betrayal in his heart. He walked a few paces, the cool air biting at his skin, but it was nothing compared to the hurt he felt inside. He heard Ethan's footsteps behind him and paused, hoping for a sign that their friendship still had a chance. "Malik, wait." Ethan called out, desperation lacing his tone. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean." But Malik shook his head, his back still turned. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't just about the necklace. It's about trust. It's about how people see me, how they always see me. I'm not your enemy." "I know," Ethan said, the regret palpable in his voice. "But I can't just go against my mom. What if she's right? What if you really did take it?" Malik spun around, his eyes blazing with hurt. "You think I'm capable of that? After everything we've been through?" "I don't know," Ethan shouted back, frustration boiling over. "I just don't know." The two boys stood there, both breathing heavily, the weight of unspoken fears and accusations hanging in the air. Malik's heart sank further, and he felt the tears welling up, threatening to spill over. He couldn't believe this was happening. The friendship that had once felt unbreakable was now teetering on the edge of collapse. "Look, I'm going home," Malik finally said, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and sorrow. "If you want to believe your mom over me, that's your choice." As Malik turned to leave, he heard Ethan's voice call after him, softer now, almost pleading. "Malik, please don't go. I'm scared too. I don't want to lose you." Malik paused, feeling a flicker of hope inside him. "Then stand up for me. Talk to your mom. Tell her I didn't do it." "She won't listen," Ethan whispered, his voice breaking. "She's too wrapped up in her fears." "Then help her see. Help her understand that not everyone who looks like me is a criminal. You know me, Ethan. You know who I am." For a moment, the air between them crackled with possibility, but the weight of the world seemed to press down on Ethan's shoulders. "I'll try," he said finally, uncertainty lacing his words. "But I can't promise anything. She's stubborn." "Stubbornness won't change the truth," Malik replied, his voice steadying. "Just remember, I was your friend before all of this. Don't let fear take that away." With that, Malik turned and walked away, feeling the distance between them grow once more. He could hear Ethan's footsteps trailing behind him, but he didn't turn back. The pain of betrayal was too fresh, and he needed space to breathe, to process the whirlwind of emotions that threatened to swallow him whole. As he made his way home, thoughts swirled in his mind. How could people jump to conclusions so easily? Why did his worth have to be questioned simply because of the color of his skin? The injustice of it all burned within him, igniting a fire he didn't know he had. In the quiet of his room, Malik sank onto his bed, staring up at the ceiling. The shadows danced across the walls, mirroring the turmoil in his heart. He picked up his phone, scrolling through messages from friends, each one a reminder of the life he had before this nightmare began. He wanted to reach out to connect, but the fear of being misunderstood held him back. Hours passed, and the weight of the evening settled heavily on his chest. Just as he was about to close his eyes, his phone buzzed, and he sat up, a flicker of hope igniting within him. It was a message from Ethan. "I talked to my mom. She's not happy, but I told her what you said. I'll keep trying." Malik felt a rush of emotions, relief, gratitude, and a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, this wouldn't be the end of their friendship. He took a deep breath and texted back, "Thank you. I appreciate it. Let's talk tomorrow." The response came quickly, "Yeah, let's." "I'm sorry, Malik. I really am." As he lay back down, Malik felt the tears he had been holding back finally spill over. He didn't know what the next day would bring, but for the first time in days, he felt a flicker of hope that things might just work out. Perhaps the shadows could be dispelled, and the light of understanding might shine through.